They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara.
Thank you for joining us again here back at Shrek Talk. I want to go ahead and just kind of start off right away by discussing what we're going to talk about this week, because it's a little bit it's kind of recent in the news and it's very personal to me. And we lost a great visionary director recently by the name of George Romero, or George A. Romero, if you want to get specific about it. And I'm a huge fan, so just going to spend a little time talking about him today and his influence on my life and some of his works.
Yeah, we had originally planned to release In a Valley of Violence, which was the second episode we recorded for the next generation of our podcast. But when this came up, I was able to take an idea that I've been thinking about for a while. We did record 3 short episodes back in the day. One of them got thrown up on YouTube about DC Deckbuilding board game. And then we did 2 more, Godzilla vs. Pacific Rim and The Impossible, a movie that came out with Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor. So those 2 never got put on the podcast.
And now Spider-Man. Tom Holland is one of the stars of it as well, the new Spider-Man.
Yeah. So we never got to release those ones, so I wanted to do a short episode where I could throw those on at the end, and this just gave us the perfect opportunity talking about the passing of one of our favorite directors, George A. Romero. So let's just kind of go into him.
Yeah, I mean, so my experience with him, I was familiar with Night of the Living Dead when I was younger, and Creepshow, of course, because that one's pretty marketable there.
Any child of the 80s is familiar with Creepshow.
Yeah, and the remake of the Night of the Living Dead was, for the most part, the majority of what I was used to him until I discovered the Dawn of the Dead film. This would have been in the early 2000s, probably about 2004. So when I discovered it, they had just put it out on DVD for the first time, and I went out and bought the DVD, and I just instantly fell in love. So much to the point that I still own the Ultimate Edition that has not only the U.S. theatrical version, but the European and the international versions with all these crazy special features. I changed my life, that movie did, and I became such a fan. I started discovering his other works. I wanted to find out what else Romero had done, and for a long time he was my favorite director of all directors. And that's not the case anymore, but the man still holds a place in my heart. Those movies, I do own a lot of his films. And I'll still watch him pretty regularly.
Well, and I came to Romero, obviously, from Night of the Living Dead. I remember as a teenager, my dad had an old VHS copy that he played, and one time I watched it. I was like 13 or something like that, maybe 12. And it actually scared me. I'd seen a bunch of horror movies, and it was pretty out there for what it was. And that Christmas, my dad had actually gotten, it was a few years down the road, he had gotten me the DVD of it. That's really my initial exposure to Romero. I really didn't get into him too much until you had gotten into him. We kind of both got into him at the same time.
Yeah, it was about the same time we both kind of got into it.
He's not my favorite director. I'd have to give that honor to probably John Carpenter or probably to James Cameron. But I do like a lot of his stuff. He's an independent filmmaker. He's always gone against the grain, against what Hollywood and what the public wants from him. And I think his career has suffered a little bit because of that. But he's put out some great movies, some classics, and we're just going to kind of give a short little discussion here on George Romero.
Yeah, I figured we could start off just by going through kind of briefly on his movies. I know you haven't seen some of the ones that we're going to discuss, and there's some in his filmography that I'm not even familiar with. But I just kind of want to go through and talk about each one a little bit.
Him with John Carpenter are like the 2 guys that their movies get remade the most. You got John Carpenter's got The Fog, The Thing, Halloween, and then you got Romero. He's got Night of the Living Dead's been remade, Dawn of the Dead's been remade, Day of the Dead's been remade, The Crazies has been remade. He's just got a whole bunch of movies out there that have been remade.
Yeah, and
that really is a testament to him.
True, but some of those remakes, I wouldn't like. The Day of the Dead remake, for example, is almost completely unrelated to.
I would never watch. I never watched it.
Yeah, I never saw it, but from what I understand about it, it really is not related. But starting back at the beginning of his career, we have Night of the Living Dead, originally called Night of Anubis, which changed pretty much changed not only horror filmmaking as a whole, and brought it into the modern at that era, but it also kind of created this whole. It changed all people in general, because we talk about the creation of the zombie, which we're not going to go too much into here today, but how he pretty much solely is responsible for this with Night of the Living Dead. And look at our world now, how big a part of our culture is. We had a craze a few years ago. Walking Dead is still hugely popular. And this all stems back to the creation of the modern zombie, not the Haitian zombie, voodoo zombies. But
yeah, that was mostly mind control. We're talking about the Living Dead.
Yes.
And he brought in that craze. In 1968 was that movie was released. And it was like almost all of his other stuff, an independent release. Each person that was involved in the production gave in $10,000. And they had $100,000 that they made the movie on.
Yeah.
Just people that they knew were in the movie, and yeah.
And it's still one of the greatest horror films ever made. It changed culture just the way Psycho had like 10 years before. And it's pretty much never looked back. They still talk stories about how the gore was perceived at the time. And when you watch it now, it's really, tame. But at that time, that was considered really, obscene.
And this wasn't actually his first. I mean, he just didn't all of a sudden pop into the director's seat. He had done a lot of commercials and stuff like that for a lot of local industries around the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah,
he was born in New York, and then he grew up grew up in New York, I believe, and then he moved to Carnegie Mellon, or to Pittsburgh to go to Carnegie Mellon. And then after graduating college and stuff like that, he did a bunch of commercials and stuff like that before they made their own movie, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, some company called like Latent Image that made some pretty. I remember the only one I recall offhand is the dishwashing soap where they're like a submarine.
You can probably still find it on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm sure they're on YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. But that was a big hit. It kind of was launched his whole career and everything that came after it, and he would kind of carry the shadow of this film for the rest of his life. I mean, it was that landmark that he
became a legend with it.
Yeah, he could never really escape it, for good or bad, depending on how you want to view it. But then the next film he did was a small little like romantic comedy called There's Always Vanilla, which I actually own. It came as a bonus disc on one of my other George Romero films, which we'll talk about in a moment. And it's just not. I can't believe I actually sat through There's Always Vanilla.
I think he was trying to get away from that horror. What's the word I'm looking for? Typecasting.
Yeah.
He's a typecast director as just a horror movie guy.
Yeah.
And the next thing he did was a romantic movie.
That he didn't write. It was really bad. I've only watched it the once. I can't bring myself to even consider watching it again. It's just only worth mentioning that it was something he was trying to experiment and still finding his ground. And again, still working with almost no budgets, financing everything himself out of the studio system.
Yeah. Just the way he always pretty much did it.
Yeah. And then after that, the movie that actually I own that has the special edition is a movie called, now referred to as Season of the Witch. At the time, I believe it was called Hungry Wives. When it was actually released.
That's a much more interesting title.
About a middle-aged woman who's kind of become bored in her life and starts to experiment with witchcraft. It's kind of a horror film. It's definitely got a lot of psychological aspects. It's very unusual. I don't know. Have you ever seen the
I've never seen Season of the Witch, no.
Oh, you'll have to borrow it from me sometime. It is an unusual adventure. I've watched it twice, so it's not something I'm a huge fan of. But I definitely think it was good because, again, he's trying new things. He's experimenting. It's a film that, as you said, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets remade at some point because there was a lot of potential, even if the film kind of was a letdown for me.
And I think because he was such an independent filmmaker that the budgets were never really there, and that's why the ideas, the stories were great for his movies, but the execution because of the budget, not because of his directing though. His directing is pretty good. That's why he's one of our favorite directors.
Yeah.
But the production-wise, that's why his movies get remade, because you're like, this is a great idea for a movie. Let's remake this. Let's make a really big budget version of it. So, yeah, never seen Season of the Witch, so I can't really tell you whether or not it would be a good remake or not, but yeah.
The next film he did, I'm actually a huge fan of. It was remade. You mentioned it earlier. It's a film called The Crazies, about a biological weapon type thing that the government has been making that accidentally gets unleashed on this town, and it starts making everybody in this small town in Pennsylvania. Again, we're back in Pennsylvania.
He loves PA.
Yep. it starts making everybody go crazy and doing some weird stuff, and it's kind of like a zombie film without actually being a zombie film in the way the characters are presented. The action scenes are. I actually this was the movie I chose after the day I heard of his passing. This is the movie I chose to throw on as my tribute to him. Because it's kind of an underrated gem, I think. I know you're not as big a fan of it, but I love this movie.
It was okay. The idea was great. The one thing I can remember the most about that is just that one chick that just laughed incessantly through the whole movie. Am I remembering that?
Kind of, yeah. There's one of the girls. She laughs quite a bit. She's infected, and it's causing her to go crazy. There's an interesting scene where her father and her have an unusual thing go down. It's kind of, a little risque, but they're going crazy. That's what's happening to everyone.
And I do remember the remake with Timothy Olyphant, and they went really, really dark with that. A lot darker than I think the original movie was. It's more like a kind of a zombie movie in that respect. The new remake version of it. But
the original, I thought, though, had some great moments, and the idea of your government kind of keeping things from you and doing. There was a lot of great stuff. Again, this is another thing that I really liked about this movie is something you commonly see in a lot of Romero movies. We can call it the cold open or the hard cold open, whatever you want to call it, but where you get this scene that just starts right at the beginning of the movie, and then the credits come in later. So, you'll see this in Martin. You'll see this in other movies that are coming up, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead. A lot of his films will have this. This one has a scene with the house burning down where a husband's going crazy and just destroying his house, and there's a daughter watching it and getting scared, and they all end up burning down because he burns this house down. And it's just a great opening. It automatically starts you off. I remember watching it with my friend Kyle, and at that point was the film after we had watched a few where he said, I've noticed this is something he does, and I really like that. And I am also a fan of that. It's something I don't know if you've ever noticed.
I've noticed it, yeah.
I think
it's like a TV show. You get that initial thing to suck the people in when they first step in, and then you play the credits.
Yeah.
No sense in just waiting 5 minutes or something while you progress through all these names while people are just sitting there. Just give them a punch in the gut right from the beginning to grab their attention. Then you can do those credits, and then you can do the rest of your movie.
Yeah. And I think this was well done in the Crazies. We'll see it better in the next film in his collection, which is actually Romero's personal favorite film of all the movies he ever made, which is called Martin.
Well, before that, just something interesting. They were just playing on the NFL Network. It's called the Stealers of the Living Dead or something like that. It's during the period in between the Crazies and Martin. He was having a lot of trouble, just making ends meet and stuff like that. So he took some film jobs for the Pittsburgh Steelers during the 1970s, the Steel Curtain and all that. He made 4 of them for them, and they have a whole special on the NFL Network that I was just watching the other day after his passing, that they were just talking about, what it was like in Pittsburgh at the time and stuff like that. And they were interviewing like Mean Joe Green and George Romero. They were talking together, and Bradshaw, I think, was in it. It's a pretty good thing, and nobody really knows about those. You can probably find those on YouTube as well.
Yeah, and I think I recall hearing something about he did those because he just kind of wanted to get away from feature making and do other things. I think
in the show he said that he just wasn't making very much money.
Yeah, and to make some money. Yeah, at the same time, so he didn't have to worry about doing anything. And could still make films, make money, but not have to worry about being so controlled by studios and things like that. So yeah, I think I've seen some of the clips of them. They're nothing special. They're old sports films. But being Pittsburgh people, it kind of makes it's a nice little bonus for us.
Yes. So then we go back to Martin.
Martin, which is his favorite film. It's a very unusual take on the vampire story. I can understand why he thinks this is his best film. Again, great cold open, hard open, whatever you want to call it. Where you're just trying to figure out what's going on in the story, and it's I've never seen another film take the same approach to the vampire. We've seen a lot of approaches to vampires.
And up to that point, it was a very, very, Vincent Price, Dracula kind of gothic thing when you got most of your vampire stuff. And then in the 80s, you get the Outsiders and the Rogues with like the Lost Boys and Near Dark and stuff like that.
The cool vampires.
Yeah, this was kind of right in between that.
Yeah, this is an unusual story about a man just trying to survive We don't actually know if he's a vampire or not. That's something that's explored throughout the story in great detail, and it's very gritty. It's very urban. It takes place, I think, in Pittsburgh. And just like the opening scene on the train, the colors, everything about it has this very like raw, low budget thing that I think actually adds a beautiful nature to the film. That's something that gives it unique more than any of his other films. I mean, obviously, some of the other films are not as polished visually, but this one, for me, something about it just does it, and I think it's a great aspect of the film.
Yeah, I like Martin. I've actually only seen Martin once, and I own it. I bought it, but I've only actually watched the entirety of it once. And that was probably about 10 years ago. It's in need of another rewatch.
I would say so. And this is also a great thing because there's a couple things that happen in this film. First off, we meet, this is the first time that Tom Savini was connected with George Romero, who would go on. They would have a very long-lasting friendship that would help both of their careers, I would argue. Both of them very much were very...
And Tom Savini is huge now. He's like the guy in makeup, and he's trained every guy in makeup.
Yeah, and they would have a great thing, but he was here as an actor. I think he did the stunts as well. And because he ended up doing a lot of stunts for him as well. I don't know if he did the special effects in this movie. Obviously, he would on the next film. But we also get to the first appearance of Christine Forrest at this point, who would later become Christine Romero, who was George's longtime partner. Was his partner for quite a long time. I believe they eventually separated.
Yeah, they did in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah, but she was his partner and collaborator for quite a long time, and so this movie kind of definitely is a big stepping forward. And I think it came out, 2 years before Dawn of the Dead?
No, it was just one. It was the year
year?
before. It was 77, and then I think Dawn of the Dead came out in 78.
Okay. Yeah, I know Dawn of the Dead was 78, but yeah, it's a very close time frame. I don't know if this helped him get back in the mode to do it or helped him get financing or what, but...
Well, I think Dario Argento, the Italian director, horror movie director, actually contributed a lot of money to Dawn of the Dead because a lot of people wanted a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. It was that popular still 10 years later.
Oh, yeah. I know about the Argento relation to that. So let's just go ahead and move on.
Yeah, let's go to Dawn
of the Dead, the movie that for me was my landmark Romero film. While I wouldn't say it's his greatest film, it's definitely the most personal to me and my favorite because it's just so... I remember watching it and the colors being so off and everything. Nowadays most people would find this film kind of slow, but what I liked was it was a realistic interpretation of these people trying to survive, just like Night was. This realized, what's our next step? What's our next step? What's our next step to survive? And of course, we can go, everybody has always discussed the implications of consumerism and all that and how it plays into the story.
And, you look at Dawn of the Dead, and besides the fact that it's been remade, the idea that, in a zombie apocalypse, what are you going to do? You're going to go to a shopping mall. That idea, that trope has been used over and over and over again since Dawn of the Dead came out. It came from Dawn of the Dead. I seen it in, 28 Days Later. I believe it was in Shaun of the Dead. There was a little scene in Shaun of the Dead for it. A lot of horror video games have used malls as a key part of the story. And that all came from Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, and for me, just watching this film today, I've been watching it for over 10 years now, and it still holds up. It's still great. The music's so fun and goofy. Like, the makeup is really bad, and that kind of gives it... I mean, even some of the zombies, there's the escalator zombie who's famous for just the look he gave as he gets caught.
That's something that Romero wanted to do. He wanted to give all of his zombies a personality. So they all kind of have, there's the Harry Kirshner zombie. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just have
the nurse,
all these zombies that are so identifiable.
Yeah, and I think it's, to me, it's the definitive Romero film, only in the sense that it combines his statements, it combines the camp he has, it combines the Dead series, which obviously is part of his. It's the best representation of everything he brings to the table. And while I would definitely not say it's the best of his films, and while I can understand why it wouldn't be a movie some people don't like, for me, it's all you need. If someone asked me for one Romero movie, this is probably the one I would say, just because of it has everything.
Okay, so what came next?
So next we had a few years where we didn't have anything coming out, and then we got a movie that's again him playing off key. This is a movie called Night Riders that didn't come out till 1981.
Was this the first movie with Ed Harris in it?
Yes, this is
was
the first
introducing
one.
Ed Harris.
Ed Harris. And it's again Tom Savini was in it. It's a story about a group of traveling around. They travel around like Renaissance fair, and they ride motorcycles instead of horses, but they live like they're in this group, and the hierarchy of the king being in control and everything has a big play in the story, and it's something that I
it's
never...
like real life LARP.
Yeah, it's like I never actually finished. I had the movie. Luckily, when I found it, it was really rare, and I found it used for like $15 or something like that, which was at that point really expensive for a used movie. But it's one of the things. I'm so glad I found it. I do need to finish watching that last like 30 minutes at some point. Kind of an unique story, but it's something I think showcasing his other talents, and he's kind of got a realist thing going. Everything seems, even though the stories don't necessarily seem like they're in a realistic world, the natural aspects of how the stories play out seems always real to me.
Well, and I've never seen Knight Riders. It's not one of the movies that are in my wheelhouse. So
yeah,
let's move on to
the next one he directed. Was actually not written by him, but we mentioned it earlier. It's probably the one most people outside of the Dead series would associate with Romero, and that's Creepshow. He would write the sequel, but not direct it.
So it's kind of weird. So he directed the first one and then wrote the second one, but not vice versa.
Yeah.
He didn't do one on one of
them. This was actually written by Stephen King. Creepshow was, and Stephen King has a great scene in it.
He's got probably the best scene, the most memorable scene in there.
I don't know. Leslie Nielsen scene's pretty good.
It's like an anthology movie.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of clips. It's based. I think it's kind of similar to the mindset they had with the old Tales from the Crypt being based off the Easy EC comics or whatever. It's kind of that same thing. These individual stories that are just kind of unusual, and it may even be based off those series as well. Actually, I'd have to look into that. But it's something that a lot of people can still remember. It still gets played on TV pretty regularly, things like that. But I would never say it's one of his best films. I mean, definitely wouldn't.
Yeah, and that one I also only seen once, and the only thing that sticks out in my mind is that Stephen King scene with like a spore that comes down on a meteor.
Yeah, and he's a real simple folk.
Yeah, and he starts changing into a plant and stuff like that. It's Creepshow. It's what it is. Didn't really, make me think this is amazing. I've got it. I actually owned it. I don't think I still do. I think I sold it a long time ago, but I did buy it. I was in that Romero phase, bought it, watched it, and I was just like, it was okay.
I think I still owe mine.
But maybe I just didn't like the stories. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, skip to 1985, and it would be inappropriate of me to actually introduce this film, considering your feelings on it.
Well, it's probably my favorite of his zombie movies. I mean, let's face it, Romero is the zombie guy. And he came out in 1985 with Day of the Dead. This movie was originally supposed to be so much bigger. He was pulled back into this story because he was so, it was so important to him. As far as basically starting his career, it made him a legend, like we said. So he kind of got pulled into starting another one. He had this big budget for this movie. Well, it didn't turn out that way. Tom Savini, some of his best work, and you can still see it to this day. The work on the zombies in there is amazing.
I would agree.
You get Bub, making that zombie presence again very, very real and very, very like they're your next door neighbor kind of thing. It could have been so much more, but it was still so great. And I kind of wish, I'm glad what I got afterwards, but I kind of wish this was the last of the Romero zombie movies. I wish it was only a trilogy.
Well, it's one of them things where I think it's okay to still classify it as the Dead trilogy. What came after that I don't necessarily consider related, even though it is. I don't see any problem with that. People do that with Indiana Jones all the time. People still call the original Star Wars trilogy a trilogy, even though there was other films that came out afterwards.
But as we pointed out on our Indiana Jones podcast, the very first one we did, it's 4 movies, not 3, whatever anybody wants to say. So I have to kind of go by that argument here.
And I could see that too.
There's 6 movies, not 3.
Yeah. So is Star Wars still the original Star Wars trilogy, or is it all just Star Wars movies now?
No, there's separate trilogies though for that. That's a different whole thing.
Anyway,
it all takes place in the same universe. This is this trilogy, this is this trilogy, and now we're getting another trilogy. So it's different in Star Wars than it is in Romero's and in the Indiana Jones saga.
And I'll take it. I still kind of see them separately in my mind, just because of the way it is. I do still count it as one series, and I do still count the original trilogy as its own trilogy too. Just the same as if they made another Before movie, it would still be the Before trilogy. Things like that. But I think this film is underrated. A lot of people find it slow, and I can understand these
it gets
arguments.
really intense towards the end. I mean, it's a slow build up because the movie wasn't intentionally or wasn't originally supposed to be that. It was supposed to be much bigger. You know, the zombie movie to end all zombie movies. But when the budget got cut and kind of Hollywood pressure came in, he kind of saved all that money up for the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's when you get, you know, all the excitement and everything that you've been building up to. But freaking Captain Rhodes and that stuff, he's awesome. Yeah, I love Day of the Dead.
Yeah, and I think it's just a perfect example of how he wasn't making zombie movies to make horror films necessarily. He was making zombie movies to reflect on human beings and our nature and how we deal with situations. And there's so many more aspects to it that I think why I think most modern audiences won't enjoy the films, because when most people want to go watch a movie, they want to go watch like the Dawn of the Dead remake. They want to see action adventure. They want to see cool kills, and they don't want to take the time to slowly develop a story that's about the people dealing with the situation. And to me, this is what makes Day of the Dead work and why it goes good. And the next film I think he did after this was probably one of his bigger studio projects. It might have even been one of his first, next to Creepshow. I think it might have been his second studio feature, a film called Monkey Shines.
Love Monkey Shines. Yeah,
which I think is also kind of forgotten, and everyone I know who's seen this film really enjoys it. It's not really a horror film. It has some aspects of that. It's about a guy who gets injured.
He gets in an accident.
Yeah,
accident,
and they end up getting him a what do they call them? A companion monkey.
Companion animals. And he gets a monkey.
And then not knowing that this monkey has been conditioned, programmed, is not a normal monkey.
Not a normal monkey. No, not at all.
And what comes afterwards, I think, is a really unique film, and I think it's really entertaining, and probably, since some people actually know this film, I could argue it's his most underrated, only in the sense that it's like people actually know what this film is and don't give it a good rating. Other films, like lots of people don't know The Crazies, lots of people don't know Martin, which makes sense. But this film was a major studio release. There's no excuse to not have enjoyed this film, and it's sad to see that it didn't. While received critically really well, it didn't perform well at the box office.
Yeah, and not a whole lot more to say about it. Just check it out. It's a really good movie. I don't know if the modern audience would enjoy it, but I really did. Check it out. It's a good movie. Now,
the next movie he did is one I didn't even actually know, and I own it on. I could only find it on VHS. I think it's finally out on DVD now, so I'm definitely going to have to get it. It's actually a film called Two Evil Eyes, which has two short films in it. One directed by Dario Argento, since they were obviously still friends, and George Romero. They're both based off of Edgar Allan Poe stories. The Dario Argento one is The Black Cat, and the George Romero one is The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. And it's one of them things, I saw it once, I can't really remember it. I think it's out on DVD now, so I need to go check it out. But again, another movie most people don't even know exists. Here it was.
I didn't know that was him. I've seen the movie out there a billion times. I've never actually watched it, didn't know it was him.
See, exactly. And not only that, you get the other legendary director of Dario Argento in there. And then shortly after that, he did his last really commercial film, I would say. I mean, we'll talk about Land of the Dead here in a moment, but The Dark Half, another adaptation of a Stephen King story that he directed, and I believe he actually wrote the screenplay for this one too. I never actually saw it. I always wanted to.
Dark Half. I'm not really that big into Stephen King stuff. Maybe that's why I never seen The Dark Half. I watched Creepshow once and didn't really like it. I mean, there's a little bit of Stephen King stuff that I like, but for the most part, I'm not a big fan. So
yeah, and then he wouldn't make another film for about another 7 years, and he'd make what is generally I've ever actually seen this film, because everything I had ever read before it came out said, if you love Romero, do not watch this movie. It's a movie called Bruiser that
I have actually seen this movie.
Yeah, and he self-financed it, wrote it, and everything himself again.
I think this was at the point where he had gone from Pittsburgh and he had moved into Canada, and now he was filming his pictures in Canada. I think this was a Canadian picture.
It's possible. I know he would end up moving to Canada around the time of Land of the Dead a few years later, but maybe it might have been a situation where it was just cheaper to make the films in there. About a man who wakes up one day without a face.
Honestly, it was bad.
Yeah.
I do not remember it. It was bad. I remember he wore masks, and I think he was a killer, some kind of serial killer or something. Oh, it was bad, and I don't remember it. So let's skip off this bad stuff about his career, because really, I mean, from Dawn of the Dead on till really Land of the Dead, he doesn't really do a whole lot. Monkey Shines was good, but
yeah. See, I'm gonna fight out because I've heard great things about Dark Half. But definitely starting with Bruiser, he was starting to show he really didn't fit in. Even not having seen that, but knowing what comes after.
His style, which was great in the 60s and 70s, and even in the early 80s, was starting to show its wear, and he couldn't compete out there with the movies that were coming out. Even cheap other budget movies, he just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but his brand of filmmaking kind of died in the late 90s, for sure.
Yeah.
Even if not even the early 90s.
Yeah. And, after that, we would get his Return to the Dead series in 2005 with Land of the Dead. Which I was super excited for when it was getting ready to come out.
I was like, this is the zombie movie he's been waiting to make for 20 years. Yes!
And I was a little let down.
And then I'm like, no.
It was just okay.
It was okay.
It was just okay.
Yeah.
I think, he couldn't really get the budget. I remember it's funny because the year before is when the Dawn of the Dead remake came out and was a huge hit.
That's why he kind of got greenlit for this one.
Yeah, and
zombies are popular now.
And I liked some of the aspects of it. I definitely think it did some good things, good cast in it. But at the end of the day, it was a mediocre film. I've watched it only a couple times.
Down the road, we're going to go through and do a whole Dead series. Maybe 2 episodes, the original trilogy, and then the next 3 he did, and kind of go through those movies. So we don't need to go too in depth on this. Dennis Hopper was in it. John Leguizamo.
Yeah, good cast.
Yeah, the cast was okay.
But oddly enough, his next film he would make, I thought of his last 3 Dead films that he did, I thought this one was the best, and it was surprising considering the nature.
Is that the next one on the list?
That is the next film he did. At this point, he only has 2 films left that he's made, both of which are Dead films. The next one after that is Diary of the Dead, which I'm oddly looking at the poster here in your room.
Here Purgatory is what I call it.
Purgatory. The command center. I was really not excited when I heard about this, knowing it was self-filmed and it was kind of a reboot on the franchise. They basically were saying we're going back and showing younger people experiencing the initial outbreak of it, but it takes place in our modern world with all the modern technologies we have and stuff like that. And I thought it was actually really well done. It
was pretty done. It was kind of like a found footage film.
Yeah.
Because Blair Witch had been so popular.
Lots of other films at this point. This was kind of an emerging genre still.
I remember him saying that he wanted to show what it was like for them as early filmmakers in the 1960s. And it was kind of this weird, Night of the Living Dead, Diary of the Dead. They're filming the actual live thing. And it's supposed to be like the filmmakers who were making the fake one back in the 60s. And it was real interesting ideas and the thoughts that he had behind it. It's a pretty decent movie. Probably the best of the later 3 Dead movies.
But still nothing fantastic.
Nothing really that great.
And then we get to the low point of the night here, which is the last film he made, which sadly I own because I loved him enough that I bought this without, the day it came out, I was waiting for it. He did a movie called Survival of the Dead, which came out in 2009. And it was supposed to be like a comedy, zombie movie kind of. It had really bad special effects. He had almost very, very low budget. There's that great scene in it that's a reference to a scene in Diary of the Dead. There's one scene that happens in Diary of the Dead that you see from the other people's where they interact with these military people. And in Survival of the Dead, you see the military people.
Yeah, there's a definite connection there.
That's probably the coolest aspect of the film.
Yeah, then you notice that in, what was it, in between Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, there's a scene where they're flying the helicopter over and you see the people that are hunting the zombies like at the end of Night of the Living Dead. So this is kind of another kind of callback to that. There's a scene that connects directly Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead taking place in the same universe.
Yeah, and so it was, for me, definitely the low point, not just of the Dead series, but possibly, since I haven't seen Bruiser, possibly his whole career. I don't know. There's Always Vanilla was pretty rough too. But it was just really sad, and I remember him making a comment around this time that he would probably only ever make Dead films again, which I was really disappointed
I thought
with.
he was working on one before he died.
He's written there was 4 screenplays that he had written before he died. One is a Dead movie, which I believe they're going to make. It's called like The Road to the Dead, I think, is something like that.
That's what I heard. Yeah, Road to the Dead, I think.
There's 2 other ones that are adaptations of books. I don't remember offhand what the books are. And there's one script that he wrote that is completely original screenplay. Not even knowing what that is, if one of those movies gets made, that's the one I would want. The one that's his original screenplay, not a Dead film at all. Just because, I mean, I look back at his career in the 70s and 80s, and, you know, I can understand why most people would not care about anything he's done besides the Dead films. But those gems in there are so beautiful. I love the... He made a comment once of, give me some lights and a few good actors and I'll make a good movie. And that's really what he did. That was the way he made films. I don't think he knew how to make any other films, and that's why if you look at his Hollywood films, they didn't feel like it.
No, he was an independent guy. He wanted to make movies his own way without anybody else's, input. And it did suffer for some of his movies with those budgets that he couldn't get. But he made the movies he wanted to make. He was a trailblazer in that regard. And he never had to bow to the Hollywood executive suits and stuff like that to make the stuff more palatable. He did what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and it's great because it shows, if you look at the influence he had. I mean, just like anytime someone really famous comes out and dies, you'll see a lot of outpouring of people and their appreciation for him. We've seen this a lot recently, obviously, with so many big names like Bowie and everything going. And here's one I remember seeing the quotes from a lot of people, and it really was honest. Stephen King, that was his friend. This quote from Edgar Wright, who made the comment of how, when he was going his career, he might not have existed if it hadn't been. If it had, it definitely would have got a different start, because he wouldn't have made Shaun of the Dead as his first feature film. And in fact, it was great how he pointed out the only comment he put on the U.S. poster was the Romero quote of an absolute blast. That was the only comment he wanted on the poster, was Romero's thing saying it was great. So much that he had a cameo. Him and Simon Pegg had cameos
in Land of the Dead.
And I mean, there's just so many other people who've come out who've expressed the idea that, like, he changed filmmaking. Like, he changed filmmaking in the sense that it helped show that you can be successful with a budget, a self-made film, which we would see especially later in the 90s by people like Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater.
Well, even in the 80s with Sam Raimi and The Evil Dead.
Yeah, I mean, so definitely you would start to see the aspects coming after that. He created a whole genre that today is obviously being massively exploited.
And he does not like The Walking Dead.
No,
I read some quotes after he passed away that I didn't know he made. He's like, all it is a soap opera with zombies.
Yeah, that's exactly what his comment was, which is something I can kind of see, considering how the story has been stretched and stuff in a lot of ways, and a little over-exaggerated. I can see that. But again, it's still inspired, and Kirkman would point out, like, he only exists because of this, and the idea of, and I think even though Romero didn't like the presentation of Walking Dead being that much, very overly dramatic, the idea of a story that's with zombies in it that's not necessarily about just the zombies, about the people trying to survive, was something that was his mindset when he created the zombie movies. It wasn't meant to be an action franchise. It wasn't meant to be anything like that. He was just making a movie about people that happen to have this these creatures propelling the story.
And so this episode was just kind of done. I mean, we didn't have time to do a whole lot of research for this one. It was an unexpected event that he had passed away, and we just wanted to show our appreciation. I was just thinking when I mentioned The Walking Dead that this is 2 zombie episodes in a row. The first episode we did last week, or last 2 weeks ago, was The Walking Dead Volume 1, and now we're doing this one here.
But it's not a zombie episode because he did more than zombies, I think that's something people forget.
He's most known for zombies.
True, and arguably so. I mean, Night of the Living Dead...
We didn't just talk about 6 zombie movies here.
Night of the Living Dead was a game changer, but I will sit here and talk about Crazies and Martin and talk about his career in other ways, because I own most of these movies we discussed today. Because it did start with Dawn of the Dead for me, where that obsession came. But the man made other things. He was great at what he did. He was respected by his peers for a reason.
All right, so any final thoughts, or you want to just go right to the pick of the week?
Yeah, I'm down to going with the pick of the week, so I'll start it off. So since we're doing Romero, it would be, I'd be remiss if I didn't pick something of his to go, and there are lots of options. We discussed every one of them today, and if I had to choose one of these films that I would say would be most accessible to people who are kind of interested in picking up what he has outside of the Dead trilogy, or trilogies, or series, whatever you want to refer to it as. Saga. I'm going to go with Crazies, because I think Crazies is a really well done film. It was definitely the in-between of Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead for me, where it showed him developing as a filmmaker, getting his own visual style and storytelling style. And it's just kind of a screwed up movie to watch, too. Like I said, I watched it the other night, and I remember finishing it and just being like, yep, I still love this movie.
All right, so my pick of the week, I'm going to go with Monkey Shines. I know we didn't talk a whole lot about it in detail, and there was a reason for that. I don't want you to know kind of what's going to go on in the movie, but if you get a chance, go check out Monkey Shines. It is a gem, very enjoyable, and if you like film at all, you're going to enjoy Monkey Shines.
Yeah, and I just, again, my final thought is I'm so sad that he's gone. He kind of hit me abruptly, and it brought me back to that time in my life when I remembered like how much obsession I had for him and how in love I was with his filmmaking. So I'm sad to see I'm sad to say we had to do this episode. Yeah,
we knew it was going to come at some point. But that'll be the end of this shorter episode. It's actually longer than some of our older ones, but from here we're going to move on to 3 shorts that we did way back in the day in 2015. The first one was posted on YouTube. It's about DC Deckbuilding. Actually, the first one is Godzilla versus Pacific Rim. Sorry about that. We discussed the Godzilla 2014 versus the Pacific Rim. And then after that is going to be the DC Deckbuilding Game, Board Game 1. And the last one when we originally recorded it, I didn't want to post it because I come off sounding really bad, really kind of racist, or making some really... And it was because I couldn't articulate when we were recording it what I really wanted to say. So just keep that in mind, that's not how I really wanted it to come off, and we kind of moved past that in the podcast pretty quickly. So check them out. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and get the chance, go out and watch yourself a George A. Romero movie in memoriam.
Oh no, they say he's got to go. Go Godzilla? That's right. That's what we're here to talk about today, among other things. What else are we here to talk about today?
We're here to talk about Pacific Rim.
Okay, well, mine obviously is more important, so that's why I went first.
We're talking about Pacific Rim here.
Oh, I thought we were talking about
Godzilla's old.
Oh, we're talking about the better movie.
The better movie, yeah, Pacific Rim.
Okay, well, let's start obviously with our topic here. We're gonna have a little fun and discuss the Godzilla 2014 version, directed by Gareth Roberts, I believe his name is, or Gareth Edwards or something like that. I forgot his name. He directed Monsters, which was a film I was quite a big fan of. He's also going to be doing the new Rogue One film for Star Wars, the spin-off kind of film that's not part of the main franchise. So obviously he was pretty successful with this film. It was well received by many people, and it was a nice reboot to the franchise. Now I know Toho Films, who makes has made all the real Godzilla films.
Well, this is a real Godzilla film.
Yeah, they consider it canon. They would consider it canon. They actually consider the Godzilla 98 canon as well. They just don't.
The one that everybody hates.
They just
Matthew Broderick.
They just don't consider it actually Godzilla. He has another name. I forgot what the character's name is. And in Godzilla Final Wars, which I think came out in 2004, you just see Godzilla actually kick the crap out of him. So that was pretty
nice.
That was pretty exciting for fans. But yeah, the new Godzilla was, I think, really well received, and I'm a big fan of it. But before we go into the battle, let me hear a little bit about your thoughts on your movie.
Okay, well, like I said when I mentioned we were arguing, Godzilla's old. I mean, that doesn't mean it's bad, but Godzilla's been around since 30s, 20s. Pacific Rim is like kind of new and fresh, and I think it was directed by Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
And
it was the 50s for Godzilla. It was 50 or 51. It might have been 49.
And starring old Jax Teller from Sons of Anarchy, and Ron Perlman is also in there from Sons of Anarchy. It's not meant to be taken as a serious film, which is, I think, Godzilla really is. This is just a fun, popcorn summer action movie. That's all it is.
Okay. So before we go further, I like Pacific Rim quite a bit. I am actually.
I enjoyed Godzilla as well.
So let me get
Rim's
that
better.
Let me get that out of there now. Here's while I will argue. Pacific Rim is really just it's an extension of the the kaijus or extensions of Godzilla, basically the giant monster, which are kaiju is I believe the term in Japan that they use to describe a giant monster. I don't know much about it. I'm not really that read into it. But it's definitely I mean, the robot, the suits, that's completely...
The Jaegers are awesome. That's one of the things that make it stand out above Godzilla.
Okay, so here's why I'm going to argue Godzilla is a better film. Godzilla has understanding of pacing a lot. In Pacific Rim, your action starts right away, and they don't hold anything back. You get to see how exciting it is, from the get-go. And so for me, the battles with them never got more intense or exciting than the original battle where you see with Gypsy Danger in the opening scene.
I disagree with that,
and that's my main issue. Whereas with Godzilla, which is some people's complaint about the film is that it's not really an action film. It's not. There's a little bit of action in it, but I mean, how often are there scenes where something's going on, shrouded in darkness, or you're watching what's happening from a television screen, and then you're only catching little clips of it, and you can't really see the exciting monster fighting action of Godzilla fighting on to the what do they call them, the Mutos. For me, I think it builds suspense and tension. Now, and it can overcome some of its shortcomings because of those things, like the really horrible chemistry of your two leads, who had better chemistry as brother and sister in Age of Ultron Avengers than they did as husband and wife. Elizabeth Olsen and Aaron Taylor Johnson, I think his name is.
The guy who played Kick-Ass.
Yeah, Kick-Ass, and he also plays Quicksilver, and she plays Scarlet Witch respectively in Age of Ultron. I think they had horrible chemistry in the film. Her acting was not that great. There was, he was really the only character that was interesting. The horrible wig that he had on Bryan Cranston. I mean, there's a lot of things that, because how well made the film was, it overcomes those shortcomings. Whereas I think Pacific Rim can overcome some of its shortcomings. It does have that great sense of fun, but you can't overcome how bad every scene with Charlie Day in it is. Whatever, the scientist guy that's got to do the mind read thing with the...
Yeah, it was funny. Okay, so yes, Godzilla is a better film. I'll agree with you there. But Pacific Rim, when you come out of it, it wasn't meant to be a great film. But when you come out of it, you just went through a wild ride, and you had a great time. I mean, the battles with the kaiju and the Jaegers, like I said, it's just a popcorn movie. And, okay, like I said, Godzilla is a better film.
So hold on,
but it's not as enjoyable to watch.
Pump the brakes there. So we're arguing Godzilla versus Pacific Rim. We've established Godzilla as the better film. Point to Mr. Joshua. Now, is Pacific Rim more enjoyable to watch? I'm going to argue that it is equal.
No.
And that's
Pacific Rim is a lot more fun to watch. Point to me for Pacific Rim. How can you not say that? Just watch it. I mean, it's like the characters in Godzilla are just there with all this other stuff going on. It's kind of like a whatchamacallit.
Whatchamacallit? That's a candy
What's
bar.
his name? I forget his name. Day After Tomorrow. Oh, Roland Emmerich. It's kind of like one of his disaster films where the characters are just kind of there and all this stuff is going on around them. Where you find your characters in Pacific Rim, they're right in the mix of things. And you create this whole interesting world, Pacific Rim, that, there's so many possibilities there for this world. Like Godzilla, they've been milking this Godzilla cow.
I can't believe you just compared
70 years.
I can't believe you just compared the new Godzilla to a Roland Emmerich film, which we're not talking about.
In a very superficial way.
Which I think is in no way, shape, or form. No, here's what it does right. Suspense, tension. There was none of this.
Here's what Pacific Rim does
There
right.
was none of
Action,
it.
explosions.
There was none of that in there. So,
pew, pew, robots knocking monsters, with a giant sword.
It's been said by somebody else. It is probably one of the best bad movies ever. And that's the thing. Godzilla is
an awesome movie.
Godzilla is a good movie.
Godzilla is like going. Let's say we go to an amusement park. Godzilla is like going on the merry-go-round. Classic staple. It's been around at the amusement parks for years. Yes, it's enjoyable, and a beautiful, merry-go-round is something to behold. But Pacific Rim is like a roller coaster. Like, it's excitement, it's, energy, it's crazy. You're screaming, you're howling at the TV, you're enjoying that ride. That's the difference between the two movies.
So, I can say I love Pacific Rim, but it's so hard to say. I can't say it's better in any way than Godzilla because I think as far as excitement goes, it's on par. Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, the first time I remember seeing the trailer for Pacific Rim and being like, holy crap, what was that? Then I remember watching the movie and seeing that first scene and being like, oh, man, that was awesome.
No, the scene in Hong Kong was way better.
But here's the problem. It was overload. By the time the next scene with the Jaegers came and the next scene, it didn't, it didn't build on top of it like it should have, in my opinion. Like, if you, I compare it to, think of Tom Yum-goong, The Protector. How you start with your first action scene and it's pretty cool, but it's quick and it's over. And then the next one's a little better and it's a little more exciting. And then the next one's a little better and it's a little more exciting. So you finally get to the end and it's just going off, and it's over. And I think that's the one thing for me. I miss out of Pacific Rim. I love it. I'm sad I don't have it in my collection anymore since
since I moved and took it with me.
Since you moved it and took it with you. But I don't own Godzilla. Now that's partially because I'm not buying movies right now. But I have desired. I will eventually own the new Godzilla. But I think Pacific Rim just was sensory overload. It was like almost like watching Transformers.
Don't go there. We're not going to discuss this. Transformers is crap.
No.
Pacific Rim
actually had some good plot and some good characters and good acting, and there was actually other things in it better. But the action is all I'm saying. It's like a sensory overload because there was so much of it, and it was so overpowering. It's like watching the third Lord of the Rings where there's all these battle sequences. I don't need to see all this continuing battle sequence all the time. That doesn't thrill me. It gets boring after a while. I want a little here and a little there spliced in that makes it this awesome sequence.
See, and I think like Godzilla, it doesn't give you the payoff at the end. Like, it builds up, but it doesn't give you the payoff. So what's better? Sensory overload with lots of action. At least you can enjoy that first one, or never getting the fulfillment that you want out of it.
Well, we'll have to disagree on that, and we'll get to that here in a second because I want to say one thing here to finish this off, and that is, all right, name your best scene from each movie, your favorite scene from each of the two movies.
Oh, I've only seen Godzilla the one time. I don't really remember it too well.
Okay. Then just from
Pacific Rim, I got to go that Hong Kong scene where they're fighting you've got the three, I think, the Chinese Jaeger, Gypsy Danger, and then the Russian Jaeger, which I love. That old style, just heavy machinery, battling the two kaijus. I think they came out, the flying one and that other one. That was just, that was epic right there. That whole action scene, I think it went on for like 20 minutes or whatever. Just beautifully done, beautifully rendered CGI and everything like that. It was amazing and a treat to watch.
Mine's a little different, and it's going to be kind of interesting. From Pac Rim, from Pacific Rim, I'm going to go with, we're canceling the apocalypse today. Idris Elba's, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name properly, I'm sorry. But his great speech, that's only, the second best speech next to Independence Day right there.
You're forgetting Braveheart, too.
No, Braveheart's down the list farther than that. So, but, that speech.
Okay, and Godzilla?
Godzilla, best scene. The scene at the end where I don't know how you did not say this paragraph, where he grabs the other Muto and he's just breathing the atomic fire breath in it and just like severs its head, cuts it off and just chucks it down, and you're like, yeah, Godzilla.
It's weird that you would pick the action scene from the slow build up Godzilla movie.
That's why I pick it, because there's not all these other action scenes for me to. There's so many that they're all great in their own way. There's this. A little bit here and a little bit tease there, and then that action scene at the end, you're just like, that is awesome. So there you go. That's why I pick it. We're obviously not going to convince the other, but we've given our reasons on why we each like the ones.
So it's time for you to decide. Do you like the action craziness of Pacific Rim, or do you like that slow build-up to, all the awesomeness that, in that filmmaking sense that was in Godzilla?
Yeah. So if you haven't seen them, both good. Check them out.
We're canceling the apocalypse. And welcome to what we've termed as Shrek Talk Reviews, where they're just going to be short little segments that we're going to do, maybe about 10, 15 minutes or so, where we review something. We actually did one of these before.
Is that what we coined that? We didn't discuss that. I guess we're
Yeah,
going with
well,
that.
I'm doing all the posting and all that.
All right, then
All
that's cool with me.
So we actually did one before on the movie The Impossible, but I didn't like the way it came out, so we never did post it. But we're going to try starting this again. Today we're actually going to be doing a board game. It's called DC Deckbuilding Game.
That's a real catchy name there.
It's a DC Comics deck-building game, actually. Terrible name.
It's genius. I mean, it's straight to the point. It tells you everything you need to know. It's not trying to sell itself as anything else. It's witty.
But it is a good game, despite the name, the bad choice of names. I mean, they spent their time and they came up with what's called the Cerberus engine, which they actually use not only on their DC Comics deck-building game, but they also use it on a Lord of the Rings deck-building game. They've got one for all 3 of the movies. They've also got one for The Hobbit. And then they've got a Street Fighter game as well.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know about the Street Fighter one. I was unaware.
Yeah, so I bought this game on a whim back in March. I sold a few of my movies and went out into the store and picked it up. And wasn't really expecting much because I read a lot of reviews about how bad the theme was and everything like that. Did you really know anything about the game before I got it?
No, you were the one who was interested in it and had done the research. You said you were, considering it, but you had these concerns about it because you had seen these reviews. But, I was. It's kind of, we both look at our games separately. I realize when we're looking at games, we might discuss it a little bit, but we have very different ideas on how we shop for games, I think. And so when you started talking about it, I was mildly interested. I think I watched one review with you or something because you were really interested in buying it. And beyond that, though, I didn't hardly know anything about it.
Yeah, I'd picked up another deck building game a couple of months before that, and I really enjoyed the whole deck building mechanic. And so I decided to pick this one up basically on the theme. I'm a DC Comics guy. I love DC Comics, and I really wanted to try it out and see what it was like. And I was very surprised. I mean, it's a very simple, easy game to learn, and it's incredibly fun. In fact, we just played it last night.
Yeah, we actually played one of the expansion version of it. But yeah, it's something that it's pretty easy to pick up. The mechanic is simple. Yeah, the theme doesn't work as amazingly as it could with the game, but it's not horrible either. There's certain times that I think the theme of the game and the way it plays. Well, why don't you give a base description of how the game works? Just the basics of how it works.
Okay, it's a real simple concept. You have cards, and you have a starting deck of really weak cards, and the object of the game is to buy up good cards and basically build your deck so that you can destroy villains. And when you destroy a villain, you get that card into your deck. And throughout the course of the game, as you build up your deck, you get victory points. And then at the end of the game, when you defeat all the villains or the deck that you can buy from is run out, you count up your victory points, the game's over, and whoever has the most victory points wins. It's really easy. The starter cards are, a punch and vulnerabilities, and then you can buy kicks, and you gain weaknesses, which are actually negative victory points. But then there's a lot of different concepts. You get to play as a hero. In the first game, I think it's your Justice League, which is the Flash, Cyborg, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and I know there's like a couple more there. But you get to play as those guys, and each one of those has a special ability. Like, for instance, Flash helps you draw a card. So you can draw a card, and you buy other cards that help you draw a card. You can draw more cards and get more power in your hand so you can defeat those supervillains. It's a really easy concept, very streamlined, very easy to recognize what you're doing. And as far as the gameplay goes, I mean, it goes pretty fast, and it seems very fluid with everything that you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a fun game because it is simple. It's easy to, I think everyone I've introduced the game to, and that you've introduced the game to, for the most part seems to enjoy it. It may not be their favorite game, but it's easy to play. The mechanic is solid. There's very, it's pretty easy to understand almost every card that comes out. Maybe one or two you'll have to.
Yeah, and it gives you like a little thing in the book for any questions you might have concerning one of the games.
A couple of the other
one of the cards.
But for the most part, I think what makes the game work so well is its simplicity. It's not hard to learn. It's not, you have multiple ways you can play the game, but you can choose. But it's not. It's something I think people a 10-year-old could pick up.
Yeah, and we've showed it to our mother, showed it to a whole group of friends, and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to learn how to play the game. And like you said, it's really easy to read off the cards. You know exactly what you're doing all the time, and you just kind of go through it and play your cards as you go. And there's lots of different versions out there. There's the DC Comics deck building games, the first version. Then you get another full-size version, which is called Heroes Unite. Third version, which is called Forever Evil, which you actually get to play as the bad guys like Lex Luthor and Sinestro, those kind of guys, Bane. You get to play as those guys against the good guys, where you're actually trying to defeat the heroes instead of the villains.
Yeah, which then also gives you the option of combining the two games and playing a good versus evil version, where the as long as you have an even number of players, one side is good, one side's evil, and you're playing against each other.
And I know you really like the Forever Evil version.
Yeah, that's the one I own. I like it because I feel it's slightly different. Okay, then let me give my one negative comment about the game here, which is there comes a point when you have so many of the things in the game, the characters, the special abilities, there's only so many options that are really beneficial, and after you've bought more than one set, you really start feeling it. Now, I own multiple sets of this game. I own the one of the Lord of the Rings versions. I own the expansion.
Which does play a little bit differently than the DC one. You don't play as a hero.
Yeah, they all play a little bit differently. But for the most part, you know one, you know them all, and the theme is basically just cut and pasted on the other one. So there is slight differences between each version. Like I would say the Forever Evil is pretty different from the main version because it's more based on destroying your cards and building this really fluid deck that's got a lot of high-powered stuff into it, whereas that's not as common in the regular game. So, but for the most part, that's my only negative comment is, you can't, there's really no point in collecting more than one or two versions of it unless you really like it. And we really like it, so we own a lot of versions of it, especially between us. But I probably won't buy any more versions of it. Just because I already own the expansion. I own two different ones, the Lord of the Rings and the Forever Evil. But we play the game regularly. I mean, I can't go 2 weeks without playing this game.
Yeah, and then there's also the Crisis expansion and Crisis 2 expansion, which I have Crisis, you have Crisis 2, that brings a whole different spin on the game, where you're playing against, you're co-oping against the villains. And that's, you have impossible mode and all kinds of crises you have to do. It's pretty crazy. There's also a Rivals version out there, which is you play as Batman and the Joker, and that's all you get to do. It's just a 2-player game. And they're also coming out with Teen Titans full box version. Should be coming out this summer. Then they've got some crossover packs too. Legion of Superheroes, Justice Society of America, the Arrow TV show. They're going to do a crossover with that. And then the one I'm kind of looking forward to is the Watchmen one.
Yeah, oddly enough, certain things like that might entice me because I do love the characters. I hope they keep add some new things into it that make it, like the Rivals was a nice spin because it was a new. I haven't played it yet, but I'm very interested in it because it will play completely. It plays different than the other ones. So I like how they obviously have a good design. The game is designed well. It's transferable easily, and you can tweak the rules to make a very different gameplay with just a few minor tweaks. And even the way your character's perks are tweaked. Changes the way your gameplay is going to go. So I like that about the game. I like that it's very easy to play a game. Sometimes a game can take an hour. Like my Lord of the Rings version takes, I've played a game in less than an hour. I've played a 4-hour version of my Forever Evil, though. So sometimes the game can take a long time as well. So that's one thing you got to be aware of when you're playing the game. It doesn't go as quick as the box. Like any game, it's never as quick on the box as it says it is on the box.
Yeah, on the box it says only 30 to 45 minutes. Now, I have played games that were that short. I played a 2-player game with Chorizo, and that game went really, really fast. But like you said, the Forever Evil one, when you're destroying those cards, it can take a long time to get done. But we both agree that this is a pretty simple game. It's a pretty fun game,
yeah,
and it's definitely something we would recommend. Sarah Plain and Tall absolutely loves this game and requests to play it all the time.
As I said, just because I have a few things about it where I feel like, but I suppose that's a good thing. It allows me to move on and play other games now that I know what I got out of this game, and I don't necessarily feel, but a Watchmen pack might entice me to buy some more. So it might draw me back in, but I'll still keep playing the versions I got. I don't see that slowing down. I add new games into my collection, and this one still gets played. as much as it did when I first got it. So.
Yeah, so I would go if you can check it out. It's a fairly cheap game. It's only about $40 as opposed to some of the bigger box games, which are like $50 or $60, even upwards of $100. So it's a fairly cheap game. You're going to get a lot of playtime out of it. It's you're going to enjoy the game. So I'd go check it out, especially if you're into comic books at all. I think you'll like it. Any final thoughts?
The artwork on some of the cards is really nice.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's the Lord of the Rings one has the pictures, which is cool in its own right, but I really like the artwork in the DC version more personally. I like artwork. So
yeah,
that's my last compliment to it.
All right, it's pretty awesome. Go check it out. DC Comics Deck Building Game.
Welcome to a short edition of Shrek Talk. This is a little feature we're trying out. We're going to do a review on a film we've watched recently or something we're interested in, and tonight it just happens to be a movie we watched earlier today, which I'm a fan of. It was your first time seeing it. It's called The Impossible. It stars Ewan McGregor and Naomi Watts and a young actor named Tom Holland. It's about a family in the 2004 tsunami in Thailand. It's kind of a disaster film. I mean, it's a little more serious material than I would say most disaster movies.
Yeah, it's not like 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow or something like that. I mean, it's a true story about
true story.
About this one family that lived through the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and basically their story. So it's giving you a kind of a close-up view of this major disaster that we all heard about. But being over here in America, you're so far removed from that. And then I think the story is actually based on a Spanish family, but I think they did a good job. I do like the idea of them using British people. Because the movie, it's American. America is the movie place, and I think it really helped to put a face on the, we're Americans, so we kind of take things our own way. But it put a better face, I think, on the disaster.
You're making this sound really. You just sound out. But the thing to think about is this was a Spanish production. It was directed by Spanish people. The crew was Spanish. Everybody involved in the film was Spanish except for the lead actors for the most part. I think they did this because those actors are a little more known. They definitely brought a lot of great performances to the film.
Yeah, it's a foregone conclusion that if you want to touch something. You want to get a great actor that really just like conveys everything. You go to the British actors. That's why Walking Dead does it. That's why Sons of Anarchy did it. You get British actors because they're traditionally trained.
I kind of got to give you something. Yeah, British actors it does add a little more class. That's the way their hierarchy of actors is. Their masterpiece theater. That's the way you go. But I think what the film does is English language films tend to be more commonly seen around the world. That is a fact. A lot of films are made in the English language, even in countries that don't speak English languages. So, moving past that, though, I think it was a good casting.
By the way, that's what I was kind of getting at when I was saying that earlier. It just came out.
It came out horribly wrong. Yeah. But I think the casting was great. Ewan McGregor gives an amazing performance. Naomi Watts gives a great performance. And Tom Holland, the young kid, it was actually my favorite, who plays Lucas, who's like a 12-year-old boy, plays in my opinion, the best performance in the film.
Well, and he is the star of the film, I think.
I would say so.
Yeah, Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor, they have a big part of the story. But I think if you calculated it out, he is on screen the most, the kid Lucas. Tom Holland played him. He is on screen the most. It's kind of, it's the whole family story, but it really focuses on him more than anybody else.
He really has to step up and grow up. In the beginning of the movie it kind of sets up that he's, having some issues, a little rebellious and things like that. He's starting to hit that age where it gets a little, he wants to start, he starts making his own decisions and going against what his parents say. But then this tragedy strikes, and it just shows like how they have to deal with it. It's really an emotional movie. There's numerous scenes where when I watch it, I get pretty choked up.
I was getting choked up tonight watching them. So if you're going to watch this movie, bring a box of Kleenexes or something next to you, have it with you, because this is going to hit you pretty hard. And this kind of goes back to something that I've always said, with the movies like Titanic and Pearl Harbor, where they make up this fake story to try to tug on your emotions, when the actual reality of the situation is so much more compelling and interesting. And this movie, once again, proves that. I mean, this was, obviously Hollywood's got to tweak some stuff here and there, change things up every now and then.
Yeah, we don't know the details of how much of this is dramatized and how much of it isn't. I'd like to believe, just because of the simple nature of the story, that not too much of it is. I mean, there are some pretty scenes that you're like, you can tell that they maybe made it a little more, especially near the end and stuff like that, where you're like, okay, maybe we're embellishing a little bit in here.
I felt the same way, like with Captain Phillips. Like, I really enjoyed that movie too. Both of them you're telling the reality of a situation like this is way more compelling than a made-up story that you come up with around one of these incidents. And just the mere fact that, they base the movie on this family's story, they show you the picture at the end or in the closing credits, that gives you the idea that pretty much this is how it was for them.
Yeah, and what I really like about it is there's so many little stories within the story. Each character kind of has his own stories. Well, the two little sons, the two youngest sons,
Thomas and
Simon.
Yeah.
I think Simon is the youngest, and Thomas about 5 and 7.5. I would say their stories are pretty much connected completely. They're together all the time. They never separate from each other, really. Then you get Ewan McGregor's story, which intertwines with the two younger ones. You get Naomi Watts, which is closely directed with Lucas's.
Yeah, they're together the whole time.
They're pretty much
Ewan
together.
McGregor's really the only character that's by himself.
Yeah, I mean, but I like that you get to see a lot of development in the characters. You get to see each one having to deal with this in their own unique way. The little kid has to learn to watch over his brother. He's never had that kind of responsibility before, and he has to take care of him. And he does, he takes it to heart. You can tell he's very protective and very serious about it. And, Ewan McGregor's torn between trying to take care of his kids, trying to find his wife and his other son, and it's just so much going on, and all these people having to deal with so many different things at the same time. And I think what they also do is you get to look snippets of the other stories, because this is one group story. There's other people. You get
some other people and stuff like that. They get into the story. You see their stories, story. But you get to see their story, what happened with these other people and everything like that. And then also, the only part I didn't really like about the movie was Lucas has a dream sequence towards the end of the film that I thought was it kind of took you out of the realism of the movie, because it's kind of, it's a dream sequence. Obviously, it's not real. But one thing I did really like about this movie as well is you told me when I was watching it that they actually used real water for this scene, the scene of the tsunami. And, in this age of CGI, when you see, it carries so much weight for something that's real, when you can see what it's doing to a building and stuff like that, instead of just CGI boards flying off and stuff like this. And you can always tell that, it really hits you when you're like, wow, this is like ridiculous. And that's what really happened. It's not some computer generated schlock. It's what really happened. And that wave is really coming through and wrecking this stuff.
Yeah. And I think what you see, one of the other minor aspects of the film that really got to me this time watching it through, is the story of all the regular people that are involved just trying to help. The local Thai people, and how they help them, and they offer them clothes, they offer them everything without it, and then they just disappear. They don't ask for any, And
yeah, and you really see in disasters like this, you always see, when you look at it, you see the good in people, and you see the bad in people.
You see the best and the worst in people.
Yes, always in a situation like this. I'd like to think that you get to see more of the best of people, like during September 11th, the best of people, you saw a lot of that. But you do see the worst of people. People are like, I don't want to let you use, I can see you're totally suffering and stuff like that. I'm not going to let you use my cell phone because it's supposed to be saved for me. That selfish nature and stuff like that. You get the best and the worst of people in this movie.
All right. So I mentioned mine earlier, so I'm going to go first. My favorite scene in the movie is the scene where Ewan McGregor is making a phone call home to, I think it's the father of Naomi Watts' character. I'm not positive who it is. It's somebody they know that's close to them.
I think it's the grandfather.
Yeah.
Brian.
Something along those lines. And it's just such an emotional scene. He's with these people, these strangers, and they're very supportive and helping him, and it gets me every time. It's a beautiful scene.
And his acting in it is freaking amazing. I thought he did a wonderful job in that scene. I would probably pick that as my number one scene too, but just for the interest of this podcast, I'm going to the end scene with Naomi Watts and her son, where he tells her something that he had to tell her before she went into surgery. That whole moment there really felt good too.
Yeah, and
It was a feel good moment of the
what I
movie.
really liked about that scene though too was it had a lot of other things in it too, like the paper that Ewan McGregor had, which we won't go into any more detail. That was a big deal, and each one of them is kind of having their own moment from it. So I thought it was a great ending of the film. Overall, I think it's a great film. It deserved its Best Picture nomination.
I would give it probably an 8.0.
Yeah, definitely a high rating. If I was going to rate it,
Good
I'd say
episode.
8.5. I think is what I rated it when I watched it, was an 8.5. So that's what I give it. So there you go, The Impossible. If you haven't heard of it, you may have. Like I said, it was nominated for Best Picture. If you haven't heard of it, go ahead and check it out.
Go away or I shall taunt you a second time.